Welcome to Boring History for Relaxing Channel. Tonight we climb into the cold, open dark with the mountain shepherds, where the bed is mostly rock, the blanket smells faintly of sheep, and the ceiling is the entire universe, which sounds poetic until a gust of wind tries to remove your soul through your ears. You stand on a high path in the late light, feeling the day loosen its grip on the slopes. Below you, the village becomes a scatter of roofs and smoke. Above you, the pasture waits, silvering under the first stars. You probably will not survive this with your modern pillow standards, but emotionally, we shall do our best. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell us where you are listening from and what your local time is. Because somewhere, someone is drifting off while you're pretending a rocky hillside is a hotel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge upward behind the flock, not quickly, because nothing about mountain shepherding rewards drama. The sheep spread ahead of you like a slow, woolly thought, nibbling at the slopes as if the entire world has been prepared as a salad bar just for them. The path is narrow and pale with dust. Pebbles shift under your feet. A bell knocks gently from the neck of one animal. Then another answers. And soon the hillside has its own loose, uneven music. This is not wandering for the sake of wandering. Across many mountain regions, from the Alps to the Balkans to the Pyrenees, shepherds followed the old seasonal rhythm of transhumance, moving animals between low winter pastures and high summer grazing. It is one of those mainstream historical facts that sounds elegant in a museum label, but in your ankles it feels more like a long argument with gravity. The reason is practical. When summer warms the upper slopes, fresh grass appears where crops cannot grow, and the flock can feed without taking food from valley fields. The sheep rise with the season. You rise with the sheep. Everyone pretends this is a plan. By evening, the air changes first. It cools around your wrists and neck. The smell of the valley, smoke, damp soil, cooking, people fades behind you. The smell of the high pasture comes forward instead. Sharp grass, stone dust, animal breath, and the faint, sour comfort of wool. You carry what you can, and not much more. A shepherd who packs like a holiday traveller soon learns that the mountain charges extra for luggage, and the fee is paid in knees. The animals know the climb better than you do. They pause at familiar ledges, push through low shrubs, and spread over a shoulder of land where the last light rests. You watch them as they graze, their backs turning gold, then grey, then almost blue. A few goats, because goats enjoy making every situation unnecessarily theatrical. Climb where no sensible creature should go. One stands on a tilted stone and looks at you with the expression of a landlord inspecting damage. The night is already beginning before the sun is fully gone. In the mountains, darkness does not simply arrive. It collects in hollows. It gathers under rocks. It fills the folds of the pasture while the ridgelines still glow. You feel this change in your body. Your shoulders drop. Your senses widen. A low place between stones becomes important. A patch of dry ground becomes exciting. Shelter is no longer an idea. It is a negotiation. Historians still argue whether the earliest high pasture systems were shaped more by climate, population pressure, trade, or inherited custom, because human beings rarely do one thing for one reason, especially when sheep are involved. What you can feel now, without needing a scholar beside you whispering footnotes into the wind, is that the arrangement makes sense. The village cannot follow every animal all summer. The fields below need tending. The high grass cannot walk down politely and introduce itself. So someone must come up here tonight. That someone is you? The shepherds who survive these nights are not reckless mountain dreamers. They are careful observers. They notice where the ground stays dry after rain. They remember which ridge catches the worst wind They know the difference between a peaceful hollow and a place where cold air settles like an unpaid bill. They look at clouds, bird movement, the mood of dogs, the shape of smoke, and the nervousness of animals. Their world is not scient, even when it is quiet. It is full of small announcements. A quirky old tidbit follows you up the slope as well. In some regions, shepherds carried or wore enormous woolen cloaks that could work as coat, blanket, rain cover, ground sheet, and, when necessary, a portable little cave of personal regret. These cloaks sometimes became so closely tied to shepherd identity that people could recognize a mountain worker by the cut, thickness, or weather-beaten smell of the garment, fashion week, but make it damp, itchy, and judged by sheep. You reach a rough stopping place near the upper pasture. There is no grand bedroom waiting, only a low ring of stones, a slant of rock, and a patch of ground that is less bad than the other patches. The flock loosens around you, cropping the grass with soft tearing sounds. The dogs circle, not fully relaxed, because their work begins just when yours wishes it could stop. The sky deepens, the first bright star appears, and then another, and then too many to count without becoming philosophical, which is dangerous when you are tired. You lower your bundle, your back complains in a language older than writing. The shepherd beside you, or perhaps the memory of many shepherds, does not complain much. Complaining uses warmth, and warmth is valuable. Instead, you take inventory, cloak, staff, food, a knife for ordinary tasks, a cord, a little vessel for milk or water, maybe a pouch of salt, maybe a charm, a prayer, a muttered habit learned from someone older. The mountain does not care whether you are brave. It cares whether you are prepared. Down below, people sleep behind walls. They have doors, shutters, hearths, and have the comforting illusion that night belongs outside. Up here, night belongs everywhere. It settles on your shoulders, rests in your hair, and slips between your fingers. Yet there is a strange comfort in the openness. You're not separate from the dark. You're simply one more warm creature among many. Tucked into the breathing hillside, the sheep continue to feed while light remains. Their bells mark distance, near, far near again. You begin to understand why shepherds could identify animals not just by sight, but by sound, habit, and attitude. One ewe pushes forward with quiet determination. Another lingers as if composing a strongly worded complaint about pasture quality. The lambs stay closer, pale shapes in the dusk, occasionally discovering that their own legs are still surprising. You are tired now in a clean, old-fashioned way, not the tiredness of screens, errands, and messages blinking for attention like tiny unpaid taxes. This is the tiredness of climbing, watching, and miscarrying, and breathing thinner air. Your thoughts become simpler. Where will you lie down? Where will the wind come from? Are the animals close enough? Is the ground dry? Is that shadow a bush, a dog, or a deeply committed wolf with excellent posture? The last rim of sunlight leaves the peaks. Cold rises from the stones. You pull your cloak closer and step carefully among the flock, guiding them toward the safer part of the slope. The mountain does not become friendly exactly. It becomes familiar by repetition. Every night survived teaches the next night how to begin, and so you stand there, between village smoke and starlight, between human sleep and animal restlessness, learning the first lesson of sleeping in the sky. The shepherd does not conquer the mountain night. The shepherd fits into it, quietly, practically, with wool on the shoulders, dogs at the edges, and a flock breathing muffledly in the dark. You search for a place to sleep with the seriousness of a person choosing a royal palace, except the royal palace is a dry patch of ground beside a suspiciously lumpy stone. The flock spreads around the upper pasture, Soft bodies dim in the dusk, and the mountain begins its evening performance of making every comfortable idea slightly worse. A hollow looks inviting until you feel the dampness in it. A flat stone looks useful until your hip imagines spending the night on it and files a complaint. A little dip behind a boulder seems sheltered, but the air inside it is colder, pooled there like invisible water. So you keep moving slowly, not far from the animals, testing the ground with your staff. The shepherd's bed is chosen with the feet first. Dryness matters. Wind matters. Drainage matters. A sleeping place that becomes a puddle at midnight is not a bed. It is a lesson with moss. You look for ground that slopes just enough to let rain slide away, but not so much that you wait gradually migrating downhill like a sad piece of luggage. The mountain offers many choices, and most of them are rude. Across upland Europe, shepherds often used whatever shelter the land already gave them. A rock overhang, a shallow cave, a fold in the slope, a low stone wall built over many seasons, or a tiny hut used only when the flock grazed high. The practical rule is old and simple. Do not sleep where the weather wants to sleep. The best place is not necessarily the warmest at sunset, but the one that will still be bearable when the wind turns cold and begins poking around for weaknesses. You crouch beside a line of stones, built knee-high and rough, the kind of wall made not for beauty but for usefulness. Stones are stacked without mortar, each one chosen by hand, lifted from the pasture, and placed by someone who probably had very little interest in leaving a legacy, and a great interest in blocking the wind. Dry stone walls are a mainstream feature of many pastoral landscapes, especially in upland Britain, Ireland, the Alps, and the Mediterranean. They divide grazing, protect animals, mark seasonal rites, and provide shelter for both beasts and exhausted humans who do not mind being mistaken for another pile of wool. You feel the wind on your face now, then turn. On one side of the wall, it presses hard, or on the other, it softens. This is not luxury, but it is progress. A shepherd does not ask, "Is this cozy?" A shepherd asks, "Will this prevent my bones from becoming musical instruments in the night?" The answer here is maybe, which in the mountains counts as optimism. Near the wall, the ground is sprinkled with old hay stems, bits of wool caught on the thorn, and the small round evidence of sheep having very little shame. You clear a space with your boot. It is never perfectly clean. Perfection belongs to people who sleep indoors and own multiple pillows. Here, you aim for less damp, less sharp, less windy, less close to whatever smell that is. Shepherd comfort is mostly subtraction. A cave mouth waits higher up, black and low. You approach it carefully, because sleeping in a cave is one of those ideas that sounds ancient and wise, until you remember that other creatures also enjoy caves and have seniority. You peer inside, the air is cool, stale, and mineral. A few old ashes lie near the entrance, proof that someone used it before. Perhaps many people did. Some mountain caves and rock shelters show centuries of seasonal use by shepherds, hunters, travellers, and hermits, because humans have always looked at a dry roof of stone and thought, "Yes, this will do," assuming nothing inside disagrees. A quirky tidbit clings to places like this. In parts of the Balkans and the Carpathians, seasonal shepherd shelters were sometimes linked to folk beliefs about invisible house spirits or mountain guardians. A shepherd might leave a little food, make a sign of blessing, or avoid certain words after dark, not because every person believed the same tale, but because when you sleep under a cliff with wolves, somewhere beyond the firelight, politeness toward the unseen feels affordable. You do not mock this. You have just apologized to a rock after tripping over it. Still, the cave is not always best. Smoke can gather beneath its roof. Water may drip from cracks. Cold can settle deep inside. If the flock is too far away, you lose the comfort of their movement and the warning of their bells. You choose instead the low stone wall and a patch of earth just beyond it. near enough to see the flock, far enough not to be used as a sheep pillow by accident. One ewe glances at you with deep suspicion, as if you are the one crowding her bedroom. Historians still argue whether many upland shelters began as planned pastoral structures, temporary family camps, or gradual improvements to places that shepherds had already been using for generations. A hut might begin as a windbreak might gain a roof might invite a door, then a shelf, then a smoke-blackened corner, and eventually someone from the future arrives and calls it cultural heritage. The first builder may simply have been tired of horizontal rain. You kneel and press your palm to the ground. It is cool, but dry. Good. You check above you. No loose stones hanging from the slope. Good. You look toward the nearest gully. If rain comes hard, water will run there. Not through your rose river. Good. You listen. The bells remain spread but not scattered. The dogs move in slow arcs around the flock. Also good. A modern campsite checklist would take several pages and include items that beep. Yours is written in touch, smell, or slope, and memory. The chosen sleeping spot must also account for danger. Predators prefer confusion. Thieves prefer darkness. Wandering animals prefer making you get up exactly when your eyes finally close. A place near a wall gives your back one less direction to worry about. A place near the flock lets you wake to disturbance. A place near a small fire, when fire is possible, adds light and smoke. A place too exposed invites wind. A place too hidden hides you from your own animals. Every choice solves one problem and introduces a smaller, more irritating one. This is called adulthood, but with more goats. You set your bundle down at last. The earth accepts it without ceremony. Around you, the mountain darkens from grey to blue to almost black. The flock gathers in loose clusters. Lambs tuck themselves beside mothers. A dog pauses at the edge of the wall, sniffs your selected bed, and gives no sign of approval whatsoever. Excellent. The committee has reviewed your proposal and remains emotionally unavailable. You spread your cloak loosely. Not yet lying down. There are still small tasks. You move stones that would press against your shoulder. You pull a few dry grasses together. You angle your belongings so the wind will not scatter them. You decide where your staff will rest within reach. You leave your boots ready, because night in the mountains has a talent for inventing urgent reasons to stand up. The sky opens fully now. The stars are not decoration. They are part of the room. The wall at your back holds a little of the day's fading warmth, and the ground beneath you has passed its test. At least for the moment, nothing about this bed is soft in the ordinary sense, but it is chosen, and that matters. It is a small agreement between your body, the animals, the stones, and the weather. You lower yourself carefully beside the wall, feeling the mountain through every layer. The sheep breathe and tear grass in the darkness. The dogs keep their invisible patrol. The wind slides over the stones, missing you by a hand's breadth, which feels almost generous in this high, exposed place. Survival begins not with bravery, but with choosing the least foolish patch of earth and being grateful it exists. You settle closer to the ground, and the first thing the ground tells you is that it has absolutely no interest in your comfort. It is firm, cool, uneven, and full of tiny opinions. A pebble finds the exact place beneath your ribs where a pebble can become a theological problem. A root presses into your thigh. A small tuft of grass tries its best to be a mattress. Bless it, but there are limits to optimism. So you begin the slow art of making a bed where no bed exists. You gather dry grass, old hay, bracken if it grows nearby, and any soft stems that have not been soaked by dew. You spread them thinly beneath your cloak, not because they will transform the place into a feather bed, but because even a finger's width of insulation can mean the difference between sleeping and lying awake while your bones send formal letters of protest. Shepherd bedding is rarely about softness alone. It is about blocking the cold from climbing into you. The cold does not only fall from the sky, it rises from the earth. Stone and damp soil drink warmth greedily from a tired body. You can feel this the moment your hand rests too long on the ground. That is why shepherds learn to place something between skin and earth. Even if that something was only straw, leaves, a folded cloak, a goat skin, or the dry side of a saddle blanket. In many pastoral regions, wool was not merely what the animals carried for market. Wool was shelter, bedding, clothing, weather protection, and a quiet little miracle that smelled like every sheep you had ever met. A heavy wool cloak is your main defense. You draw it around your shoulders, then loosen it, then pull it tighter again, because arranging a cloak for sleep is a small wrestling match with fabric and gravity. The outside is rough from use. The inside holds warmth where your body has begun to give it away. Wool can keep insulating even when slightly damp. A mainstream practical fact that helped make it valuable for shepherds, sailors, soldiers, and anyone else who spent too much time outdoors wondering why civilization had not invented better evenings. You fold one edge under your hip, another across your chest. You tuck your knees slightly. You learn at once that the shape of sleep is not the wide, careless sprawl of a person in a warm room. Up here, sleep becomes compact. Your body curls inward like a question mark. Your hands disappear into sleeves or folds. Your feet seek each other. You're not being dramatic. You're reducing the amount of yourself available for the night to steal. Beside you lies a sheepskin, cured and worn thin in places, but still useful. Its wool side traps air. Its skin side blocks some of the damp. You shake it once, not too boldly, because old bedding can contain grass seeds, dust, and possibly one insect with a personal grudge. Then you place it where your shoulders will rest. A sheepskin is not elegant, but elegance has stayed in the valley with the people who own chairs. In some areas, shepherds also used felted wool mats, capes, or thick sleeveless garments that doubled as bedding, felt made by matting wool fibres with moisture, heat and pressure, is one of humanity's older textile technologies, especially important across Central Asia and other pastoral worlds. It can be dense, warm, and resistant to wind. It also has the charming quality of making you look like a walking rug, which is useful if your goal is to blend emotionally with a hillside. A quirky tidbit follows the wool into the night. In parts of Eastern Europe and the Caucasus, shepherds were sometimes described wearing shaggy cloaks so large and hairy that travellers compared them to bears from a distance. This may have helped against weather, but it must have created awkward moments in poor visibility. Imagine waving politely at what you think is a shepherd, only to discover the mountain has sent you an actual bear, socially difficult. Historians still argue whether certain iconic shepherd garments develop mainly from local climate needs, available breeds of sheep, military influence, trade routes, or the deep stubbornness of rural tradition. The answer, as usual, is probably a tangled bundle of all of them. A cloak is never just a cloak. It is landscape, economy, animal breeding, inheritance, and personal smell, all stitched together into something you hope will keep your shoulders from freezing. You pull at the hem and make a hood. You breathe into the phase near your chest, then turn your face away so damp breath does not soak the wool. Moisture is the quiet enemy of night warmth. Sweat from climbing, dew from grass, breath trapped under cloth, rain blown sideways from a cloud that has no manners. All of it can turn insulation heavy and cold. The experienced shepherd avoids overheating before sleep. You do not wrap yourself like a festival dumpling too early, because if you sweat, the mountain will collect its debt later. The sheep help in a small way. Their bodies warm the air nearby, not much, not like a hearth, but enough that sleeping near the flock can soften the cold edge of the night. You smell them clearly now. Lanolin, grass, milk, and dust is not a perfume anyone would bottle, unless they were making very bold business decisions, but it is alive and familiar. The animals shift, sigh, crops and settle. Their warmth belongs to them. but the presence of many breathing creatures makes the open dark feel less empty. You use your bundle as a pillow. Pillow is a generous word. It is more of a lump with ambition. Inside may be spare cloth, a bit of food wrapped carefully, a cord, maybe a small wooden bowl. You adjust it again and again until your neck accepts that this is its fate. A modern traveller might complain to management. Up here, management is a cloud. The bedding also has to stay ready for movement. You cannot disappear completely into comfort. If a dog barks sharply, if the flock surges, if weather turns cruel, you must rise quickly so your cloak is tucked, but not trapped. Your staff is reachable. Your boots remain near your feet. The shepherd's bed must be warm enough for rest and loose enough for trouble. It is a blanket and an emergency exit at the same time. You notice how every layer has a cure. Grass breaks contact with the ground. Skin blocks damp. Wool traps warmth. A cloak cuts wind. Your curled posture saves heat. The wall behind you shields one side. The flock offers sound and presence. Nothing works alone. Survival is a stack of small defences, none impressive by itself, all quietly necessary. Now you lower your head onto the bundle. The wool scratches your cheek. A dry stem crackles under your shoulder. Somewhere in the dark, a sheep coughs with the weary authority of an old village aunt. You smile despite yourself. The sky glitters above, too clear, too wide, too cold to ignore. Yet inside the folded cloak, beneath the sheepskin, above the stubborn earth, a narrow pocket of warmth begins to form. You do not feel comfortable exactly above. You feel less exposed. That is the mountain version of luxury. Your breath slows. Your knees stay tucked. Your hands warm under the cloak. The bed is rough, but it is yours for the night, made from wool, grass, animal labour, and patient human adjustment. And in the high dark, where even silence seems cold, you learn that softness is pleasant, but insulation is survival wearing a humble face. You coax the fire into being with the patience of someone asking a very tired old friend for one small favour. At first there is only a pale twist of smoke, a thread of it rising from dry grass and shaved wood, then bending sideways as the wind immediately interferes, because the wind has never once minded its own business. You cup your hands around the little glow. You lean close, careful not to breathe too hard. The ember brightens, dulls, brightens again, and then a small flame stands up, thin and uncertain, licking along a twig. This is not a grand fire. It is not a roaring hearth with iron pots, benches, and somebody humming near a clean kitchen wall. It is a guarded spark in a wide and indifferent place. Every bit of fuel matters. Above the tree line, wood can be scarce, and even below it, shepherds cannot always afford to burn freely. You collect dry roots, dwarf shrubs, thorn, pine cones from lower slopes, broken branches carried up earlier, and sometimes dried dung, which burns better than its public image suggests. Humanity has had to be practical long before it had the luxury of being delicate. A small fire works harder than it looks. It warms your hands, dries the edge of your cloak, gives light enough to mend a strap or find a knife, and discourages some animals from coming too close. It becomes a little centre, a bright coin paid to the darkness. You set stones around it to hold the heat and keep the flame from crawling into grass. The stones absorb warmth slowly, then return it even after the flames lower. Nothing here is wasted. Even heat is asked to do a second job. Fire has been central to human survival for hundreds of thousands of years, and among mountain shepherds it remained one of the simplest tools for turning a dangerous night into a manageable one. The mainstream historical fact is plain enough. Seasonal herders across many regions used fires for warmth, cooking, protection, signalling, and work after sunset. The less plain part is how much judgment this required. Too little fire, and the cold winds. Too much fire, and fuel disappears. Smoke blinds you, or sparks run wild in dry grass. The mountain does not reward enthusiasm without supervision. You crouch beside the flame and feed it twig by twig. The fire snaps softly. Its light catches the eyes of sheep nearby, briefly turning them into floating amber beads. One lamb stares with a deep philosophical concern, as if fire is an idea it does not approve of but cannot vote against. A dog settles just beyond the glow, nose on paws, pretending not to enjoy the warmth. This is the ancient politics of the campfire. Everyone wants the heat. Everyone acts dignified about it. The smoke chooses your fee, of course it does. No matter where you sit, the smoke finds you with the loyalty of a bad rumour. You shift left, it follows. You shift right, it follows again. You begin to understand why shepherds' cloaks, hair, and shelters often smelled of smoke. That scent was not just inconvenience. Smoke helped repel insects, preserved some foods, dried damp cloth, and marked the body with the practical perfume of endurance. Still, when it enters your eyes, endurance feels overrated. A quirky tidbit comes glowing through the haze. In parts of the Alps and the Balkans, shepherds once used bits of glowing fungus, resinous splinters, or slow matches made from prepared plant fibres to carry fire from one place to another. The idea was simple. Starting a flame from nothing could be annoying, especially in wind or damp weather. So you carried a living ember like a very needy pet. Imagine crossing a mountain with your flock, your food, your cloak, and one smouldering lump that must not die. Modern life has phone chargers. Older life had emotionally demanding coals. You warm a little milk or water if you have it. A small pot or metal cup rests near the embers. It does not need to boil dramatically. Warmth is enough. Steam rises faintly, carrying the smell of milk, smoke, and metal. You take a slow mouthful. It spreads down into your chest with quiet kindness. The firelight makes everything close seem important and everything beyond it uncertain. Your hands, the cup, the dog's ears, the sheep just outside the glow, the stones blackening at the edge of the flame. Beyond that, the mountain holds its breath. Historians still argue whether night fires served more as practical protection, social gathering points, ritual centres, or psychological anchors in high pasture life. You suspect the answer depends on the night. On a calm evening, a fire is friendly. In cold fog, it is survival. When predators move nearby, it is warning. When loneliness grows large, it is company. Fire is wonderfully flexible that way. It does not ask whether you need heat, courage, dinner, or just something to look at while pretending not to worry. The shepherds sitting near such fires might talk softly if there are several of them. They might tell a local tale, complain about a stubborn animal, count losses, plan grazing, or fall into a silence so complete that the crackle of the flame becomes conversation enough. If you are alone, you listen to the fire as if it understands you. It pops, it sighs, it collapses inward. It says, in its tiny bright language, "Keep feeding me and we shall both make it a little longer." The flame also extends your senses. Without it, your eyes surrender quickly to darkness. With it, shadows move at the edge of sight, sometimes helpfully, sometimes not. A low rock becomes a crouching figure. A bush becomes a wolf for 3 intense seconds. A sheep walking behind another sheep becomes a mysterious double sheep, which is less frightening but still unnecessary. The fire reveals and invents at the same time. You learn not to trust every shape, but also not to ignore them. You turn your cloak, letting a damp hem face the warmth. Steam lifts from the wool, not much, but enough. You hold your palms toward the coals, then tuck them under your arms. Your fingers ache as they warm. That prickling return of feeling which seems rude, but is usually good news. The fire does not make the night comfortable. It makes the discomfort negotiable. Fuel must be rationed through the hours. You build the flame low, then let it settle into coals. A blazing fire is cheerful but hungry. Coals are quieter and wiser. They breathe red under ash, giving steady heat without shouting about it. You push a few small pieces inward with a stick. Sparks lift and vanish into the dark like tiny stars that gave up on astronomy. There is risk as well. Shepherds in dry pastures had to guard against runaway flames. A careless spark in summer grass could become disaster. In stone shelters, smoke could thicken under poor roofs. In caves, bad air could gather. Even comfort needs manners. So you keep the fire small, watched, contained. You place it where wind cannot scatter it easily. You sleep close enough to feel its fading warmth. Not so close that your cloak becomes a cautionary tale. The animals begin to settle more fully. The bells slow. The dogs remain alert, but their bodies loosen near the warmth. Your face is warm on one side and cold on the other, which is the traditional mountain shepherd beauty treatment. Very exclusive. Terrible reviews. You rotate slightly, offering your other cheek to the fire, because fairness matters even when your nose is numb. Above, the stars burn without heat. Below, your small fire glows with all the fragile usefulness in the world. You understand why people guarded flame with reverence. It is not simply bright, it is stored effort, dry wood collected by tired hands, knowledge passed through ordinary gestures, caution, memory, and need. It makes a circle where rest becomes possible. You feed one last twig into the coals and watch it catch. The flame rises briefly, golden clear, then lowers again. Your eyelids grow heavy. The smoke thins. Round you the flock breathes. The dogs listen. The stones hold a little warmth, and the fire keeps its soft red eye open in the dark. You lean toward it, not too close, grateful for its small stubborn life, and let its glow become the slow pulse of the night. You notice the dogs most clearly when they stop moving. While they patrol, they are part of the restless edge of the pasture, pale shapes sliding between sheep and shadow, pause soundless on the thin grass, but when one pauses, head lifted, ears tilted towards something you cannot hear. The whole night seems to lean with it. Your own breathing becomes careful. The flock continues to murmur and crop, unaware or pretending very well, because sheep have perfected the art of looking innocent in situations they definitely helped create. The guard dog nearest you is large, heavy-coated, and calm in the way only a working animal can be calm. Not sleepy, not lazy, calm like a locked gate. Its body is angled outward from the flock, facing the dark rather than the warmth, because its job is not to enjoy the evening. Its job is to make sure the evening does not develop teeth. You watch its nose move slightly, its ears flick, its tail lies still. Nothing dramatic happens, which is often the best possible result. Livestock guardian dogs have worked with pastoral communities for thousands of years across many regions. From the mountain ranges of Europe to Western and Central Asia, breeds and local types differ, but the idea remains steady. The dog lives with the flock, bonds with it, moves among it, and warns or confronts predators that come too close. This is a mainstream historical fact. Although the dog itself does not care that it is historically important, it would prefer you not step on its paw. These dogs are not the same as nimble herding dogs that gather sheep by command. A herding dog moves the flock, a guardian dog protects it. The distinction matters in the night. You are not watching a clever little animal waiting for whistles and instructions. You are watching a quiet mountain professional with fur, teeth, judgment, and probably more discipline than several governments. It does not chase every sound. It listens. It decides. It saves energy for the real thing. You lie wrapped in wool and try to hear what the dog hears. The mountain replies with layers. Grass brushes stone. A sheep shifts. A bell taps once, then goes quiet, far away. Water moves in a gully, steady and cold, somewhere lower on the slope. A loose pebble clicks. Your head turns at once, but the dog does not rise. Apparently, the pebble is not a crisis. The dog has reviewed the matter and found you embarrassing. The flock trusts these animals in ways that are easy to miss. Lambs sleep near them. Ewes pass close without panic. The dogs smell of the flock, live with the flock, and learn the shape of ordinary movement. That is why a strange movement stands out. A predator's approach, a human stranger, another dog, a sudden scattering at the edge, all disturb the familiar pattern. The Guardian does not need every detail explained. It knows what belongs. A quirky tidbit pads quietly into the dark. In some regions, Guardian dogs wore wide collars studded with iron spikes, not for decoration, although they did make quite a statement, but to protect the throat if they fought wolves. These collars could be fierce, heavy, and beautifully worked, a strange blend of tool, armour, and rural fashion. Imagine arriving at a village celebration wearing one. Bold look, hard to hug, wolves, bears, lynx, jackals, and thieves were all part of the old anxiety around flocks, depending on the region. The exact danger changed with landscape and century. In some places, wolves were the great concern. In others, human theft could be just as worrying. Livestock represented wealth, food, breeding stock, wool, milk, and survival. Losing animals was not merely inconvenient, it could mean debt, hunger, or disgrace. The dog, resting with the eyes half closed, is therefore not a pet in the soft modern sense, it is insurance with a heartbeat. Historians still argue whether the earliest livestock guardian dogs were shaped mainly by deliberate breeding, long companionship around camps, selection by predator pressure, or simple practical survival over many generations. You can imagine it beginning without any grand plan. A dog that stays close to the animals is useful. A dog that barks at danger is more useful. A dog that does not panic the flock is better still. Keep those dogs, feed those dogs, let those dogs have puppies, repeat for centuries, and eventually the mountain has a white, watchful presence at the edge of every dark pasture. The dog nearest you stands. It does not leap up. It rises in one smooth, heavy movement, as if the ground has politely released it. Another dog farther away lifts its head. The sheep closest to them pause, mouths full, chewing in slow uncertainty. You feel your own body go alert inside the cloak. Every imagined monster in your mind immediately holds a meeting. The dog gives one low bark, not frantic, not repeated, a single deep sound, round and serious, rolling across the grass. Then it walks toward the outer edge of the flock. Another dog moves to the side, spreading the line. They do not race into the darkness. They show themselves. They make presence visible. Many predators prefer easy prey and dislike confident resistance. A good guardian dog understands theatre. It is not just protecting sheep, it is announcing, with excellent posture, that the sheep come with unpleasant terms and conditions. For a while, nothing follows. The dogs remain outward facing. You strain your eyes. The dark gives back only shapes. A shrub, a stone, a low fold of land, perhaps a fox, perhaps nothing, perhaps the mountain coughed and everyone got professional about it. Eventually, one dog snorts, scratches once behind an ear, and sits. The other stays standing a little longer. Because someone on this hillside has standards. You exhale, very quietly, of course, as if the night has a librarian. The flock resumes its softer noises. The bells begin again in scattered notes. Your heart, which had briefly tried to climb out and walk home, returns to ordinary duties. You understand now how sleep happens in fragments. The shepherd does not simply close the eyes and vanish. Rest is braided with listening. The dogs make that possible. They do not remove danger, but they share the burden of noticing it. You watch them through half-lowered eyelids. One patrols along the wall. then stops to sniff where the wind falls over the stones. Another circles the lambs. A third lies on a rise, choosing the least comfortable but most useful place, because apparently even a dog believe good views matter more than spinal health. Their pale coats catch the starlight. At moments they look almost like stones, at others like pieces of cloud that came down to guard the grass. Their bond with the shepherd is quieter than affection performed for an audience. There may be a hand on the head, a scrap of food, a muttered word, there may also be correction, command, long familiarity, and mutual irritation. Working together does not require constant sentiment. The dog knows your movements, you know its bark. One sharp alarm means something different from a bored grumble. A restless pacing means something different from a relaxed patrol. The night is full of vocabulary that never becomes speech. Cold thickens along the ground. You pull your cloak tighter and feel safer knowing the dogs are awake in the places where you cannot be. Their presence changes the size of the darkness. It no longer presses directly against your skin. It begins beyond them, beyond those listening ears and steady bodies. You are still exposed, still lying under a sky too large for comfort, but the edge has moved outward. A final bark rises from the far side of the flock and then fades. No panic follows, no rush of hooves. Only the soft, working silence returns. The dog beside the wall circles once, lowers itself with a sigh, and places its muzzle on its paws. Its eyes remain open. Yours begin to close. You sleep because the dogs do not. That is the arrangement. Simple and ancient. They keep their ears turned toward the dark, their noses reading the wind, their bodies planted between hunger and wool. You lie close to the wall, wrapped in the smell of smoke and sheep, listening to the slow bells and the breathing flock, while the guardians hold the border of the night with calm, patient authority. You eat before sleep because hunger has a way of becoming louder in the dark. It begins as a small emptiness under the ribs, then grows theatrical, then starts offering opinions about every decision you have ever made. The mountain may be patient, but your stomach is not. It does not care about stars, ancient customs, or the dignity of pastoral life. It wants bread, and it would like to speak to whoever packed so little of it. You sit low beside the warmth, with your cloak drawn around your shoulders and your bundle open near your knees. Supper is simple because everything elaborate has been left far below with the walls, ovens, tables, and people who believe plates are a basic human right. Here, food must be light enough to carry, sturdy enough not to spoil quickly, and plain enough to survive being wrapped in cloth, bumped against a staff, and judged by goats. Bread comes first, dense and dark, torn rather than sliced. It has a hard crust and a chewy middle, and it tastes better than it has any legal right to taste, mostly because you climbed a mountain to deserve it. The cheese is firm, salty, and slightly sharp. It may be made from sheep's milk, goat's milk, cow's milk, or whatever the local herding well provides. In many mountain regions, dairying was central to pastoral life, and shepherds turned milk into cheese, curds, butter, and other foods because fresh milk spoils quickly, while cheese can be stored, carried, traded, and eaten with one cold hand in the dark. That is a mainstream historical fact with a very practical flavour. Cheese is milk that has learned patience. Also, it does not slosh in your bag, which is an underrated virtue. You break off a piece and eat it with the bread. Salt wakes your mouth. Fat softens the hunger. The food is not fancy, but it is dense with effort. Somewhere in its taste are the morning milking, the strained cloth, the warmed vat, the pressed curd, the careful storage, the hands that knew when a cheese was ready by touch and smell. A modern label might call it artisanal and charge a troubling amount for it. Up here, it is dinner, and dinner has no patience for branding. There may be milk as well, warm if you are lucky, sour if the day has been long, thickened into curds if the shepherd has planned well. You drink slowly from a wooden bowl or small cup, feeling the liquid coat your throat. Fresh sheep's milk is rich, heavier than cow's milk, with a sweetness under its animal warmth. Goat's milk can be sharper, more direct, as if the goat personally negotiated the flavour. You do not complain. Complaining near goats feels like inviting a debate you cannot win. A small pouch of salt may sit near the food, precious and necessary. Salt-seasoned supper helps preserve cheese and meat, and matters for animals as well as people. In many pastoral economies, salt was valuable enough to shape routes, trade habits, and seasonal stops. Sheep and goats need minerals, and shepherds knew where salt licks were found or carried salt when needed. The flock grazes in the dark nearby, unaware that its nutritional management is more organised than your current life plan. You might have onions, garlic, dried herbs, walnuts, chestnuts, dried fruit, or a strip of cured meat depending on region, season, wealth, and luck. A shepherd's meal is a map of local landscape. In Mediterranean uplands, olive oil might appear, carefully carried and poured serenely over bread. In colder uplands, smoked or dried foods travel better. In the Caucasus or Central Asian pastures, flatbreads, fermented milk, and dried curds might sustain long movement across open ground. The details change, but the rule remains the same. Food must endure the climb. A quirky tidbit arrives with the curds. Some herding communities made very hard dried milk balls or curd pieces that could last for months. Small sour nuggets of survival that softened in water or were sucked slowly while walking. They were not exactly candy, unless your childhood was extremely stern, but they carried protein and salt in a portable form. Imagine inventing a snack so practical that enjoyment is almost beside the point. Mountain cuisine sometimes says, "You will live," and then considers the matter closed. Historians still argue whether shepherd diets were usually as limited as travellers claimed, or whether outsiders simply noticed the plainest foods and missed the seasonal variety. Household exchanges, feast days, and local skill behind them. A passing visitor sees bread and cheese and writes, "These people eat very simply." The shepherd may be thinking, "Yeah, because tonight I am on a cliff, not hosting your cousin's wedding." Context, as ever, improves the menu. You eat slowly because haste wastes warmth. Food taken too fast can sit heavily in a body already cold and tired. Small bites keep the hands moving, the jaw working, the mind anchored. The fire glows low. A dog watches your bread with the solemn concentration of a monk studying a sacred text. You pretend not to notice. The dog pretends not to beg. Both performances are unconvincing. At last, you toss a scrap. It vanishes before touching the ground. And the dog returns to noble duty with crumbs in its whiskers. The flock provides not only food but rhythm. Milk is not available whenever a person feels whimsical. It depends on lambing, season, breed, weather, grazing, and the needs of the young animals. A good shepherd knows how much can be taken and when. Too greedy, and the flock weakens. Too careless, and food is lost. Survival is not a heroic feast by firelight. It is a long, measured relationship with animals who do not read contracts but definitely notice poor management. You wipe the knife on grass, then cloth. You wrap the remaining cheese tightly, pushing it back into the bundle where night damp will not touch it too much. Crumbs are gathered, partly from thrift and partly because leaving food scattered can invite small visitors with bright eyes and terrible manners. Mice, foxes, insects, and bold little birds all appreciate a careless shepherd. So does every creature that believes your supper should become a public event. The taste of smoke settles over everything. Bread tastes faintly smoked. Cheese tastes faintly smoked. Your fingers taste faintly smoked. At some point you suspect even your thoughts have become smoked. This is not unpleasant. It gives the meal a warm bitterness, a flavour tied to the fire and the cold air. Below in the village, supper may have had a pot, a ladle, Voices, children, and a door closed against the night. Up here, it's smaller, quieter, and somehow more complete because each bite has reached you the hard way. You drink gain just enough. Too much liquid means rising in the cold later, and no one wishes to negotiate with darkness for such a humble errand. You tuck the cup away. Your body begins to change with the meal. Hunger loosens. The shoulders soften. Warmth spreads from the stomach outward. Not dramatically, but like a small lamp being lit inside cloth. The animals shift. The dogs listen. The stars sharpen overhead. You lean back against stone and feel the calm that follows plain food eaten at the edge of sleep. The bread, the cheese, the milk, the pinch of salt, all of it becomes part of the night's shelter. Not a wall, not a roof, but a strength carried inward. You close the bundle, hold the last taste on your tongue, and let supper become warmth, and warmth become drowsiness. Under the cold and glittering sky, you wake not because anything has touched you, but because the air has changed its mind. A little while ago, it lay cold and clear across the pasture. Now it presses damply against your face, carrying the smell of wet stone and distant rain. Your eyes open inside the fold of the cloak. For a moment you do not move, you simply listen. The bells are slow, the flock is near, the dogs are awake, or at least awake enough to be offended by whatever is coming. Fog slides over the slope in pale layers. At first it is only a blur around the sheep. Then it thickens until the nearest animals become soft. Floating backs and the farther ones vanish completely. The stars disappear as if someone has quietly put them away. Your chosen patch of ground, once open to the whole sky, becomes a small grey room with no walls and very unreliable furniture. Mountain weather is famously quick to change because elevation, wind, moisture, and terrain all work together, like a committee that enjoys surprises. Air rises along slopes, cools, forms cloud, breaks into rain, clears, then returns with a new opinion. A mainstream historical fact sits inside this damp discomfort. Shepherds in high pastures had to understand local weather signs long before written forecasts or instruments were common, because a wrong guess could scatter animals, soak bedding, chill bodies, or trap a flock in dangerous terrain. The mountain did not send notifications. It sent cloud and smell, pressure, and the behaviour of creatures who noticed things sooner than you did. You push yourself upright, gathering the cloak before it slips into the wet grass. Dew has formed on the outer wool, tiny beads that catch the faint fire glow. Your hands test the air. It is not yet raining, but it is thinking about it. This is the worst part of mountain weather. The thinking. A storm that arrives boldly can at least be dealt with. A storm that lingers nearby like an indecisive guest makes everyone rearrange their life around it. The shepherd reads signs. A ring around the moon can suggest moisture high in the air. A sudden stillness may come before wind. Clouds building vertically behind a ridge can mean thunder. Sheep sometimes bunch together before rough weather. And goats, naturally, may climb somewhere inconvenient, because goats respond to danger by becoming more like furniture placed by an enemy. Birds fly lower. Smoke from a fire may flatten or twist. The smell of rain can travel ahead of the rain itself, carried by gusts down gullies and over ridges. You turn toward the flock and count by sound more than sight. Bells give positions. A low bleat answers another. The dogs move in widening circles, keeping the animals from drifting into the fog. In thick weather, sheep can wander into gullies, onto scree or toward cliffs. A shepherd who loses sight must listen harder. The world shrinks, but responsibility does not. It simply becomes harder to see, which is rude but traditional. A gust comes suddenly, cold and clean, pushing the fog sideways. The fire flares low, then bends, sparks glow and vanish in the wet air. You secure loose cloth and pull your bundle closer to the wall. Anything left uncovered will become damp. Anything damp will become heavy. Anything heavy will become miserable. This is the shepherd's chain of reasoning, as elegant as philosophy and much more useful at midnight. Rain begins as fine mist. It settles on your eyelashes and the backs of your hands, then drops appear, tapping the stones, darkening the grass, striking the cloak with soft little ticks. You do not panic. Panic burns heat and solves almost nothing, although it does provide brief cardio. You shift your bedding away from the lowest ground, tuck the sheepskin under the cloak, and angle your body so the rain runs over the outer layer rather than into the folds. If there is a roofed shelter nearby, this is when it becomes beautiful, no matter how smoky, cramped, or decorated with spider opinions. A quirky tidbit rises with the mist. In some mountain traditions, shepherd musicians used weather rhymes, saints' days, and animal omens to judge the coming sky. A certain wind on a feast day might be taken as a sign for the season. A restless flock or a haloed moon might set old tongues moving. Not every saying worked. Of course, some were local wisdom distilled from generations of watching. Others were probably invented by someone who guessed correctly twice and became unbearable at supper. Historians still argue whether traditional weather lore should be understood mainly as practical environmental knowledge, symbolic culture, or a blend of observation and memory shaped into sayings that could be taught easily. You can feel why a rhyme helps. A tired shepherd may not remember a lecture on atmospheric moisture, but a short phrase about clouds over a named ridge can survive in the mind while rain is already sliding down the neck. Thunder mutters far away, not overhead, not yet. The sound rolls behind the peaks, softened by distance. The flock stirs, the dogs lift their heads, you wait. Lightning in open high ground is not romantic. It is an instruction to become sensible quickly. Shepherds learn to avoid exposed ridges, lone tall trees, and metal tools raised foolishly in storms. A staff is useful, but waving it at the sky during thunder is a bold application for early retirement. The rain strengthens. You crouch lower behind the wall, drawing the cloak around you. Water runs along the outside and drips from the hem. The wool grows heavier, but beneath it your inner layers remain mostly dry. Mostly is a heroic word in this context. Your knees are drawn up, your feet are tucked, your bundle is under your arm. The fire sinks to a red glow, sheltered by stones. Smoke crawls low, unwilling to rise through wet air. The cold enters slowly, not as a dramatic blast, but as persistence. It touches the fingers first, then the nose, then the back where cloth has compressed. You shift to restore air between layers. Trapped air is warmth. Flattened layers are betrayal. You wiggle toes inside your boots. You flex hands beneath the cloak. Small movements matter. They keep blood moving without wasting too much energy. The trick is not to fight the weather like a hero in a painted story. The trick is to endure it like a damp, irritated mammal with responsibilities. The flock bunches closer. Their bodies form pale masses in the fog. A lamb complains, thin and offended. Its mother answers with a low sound. Bells knocked on softly. Closer together now. The animals know to turn their backs to wind, to lower heads, to find leeward places if they can. You guide them with voice and staff, not far, just enough to keep them from pressing toward the wrong edge. Your words are simple, repeated, more sound than command. The sheep respond to tone, movement, habit. You are not giving a speech. No sheep has ever been improved by a speech. Then, as quickly as it gathered, the worst of the rain loosens. The drops become lighter. Thunder rolls farther away, the fog thins into torn veils, and one star returns above a broken ridge. Looking sug for having missed the unpleasant part, the pasture gleams, every stone shines. The cloak smells wet, smoky, and deeply pastoral, which is a polite way of saying you would not wear it to a formal dinner unless the dinner was held in a barn during a crisis. You check the animals again, near enough. Calm enough, the dogs shake themselves, sending water everywhere with the generous spirit of creatures who believe moisture should be shared. You receive some on your face and accept it as part of the ancient bargain. The fire, reduced but alive, glows under ash. You feed it carefully, not to blaze, just to breathe. A little steam lifts from the stones. The mountain has not become safe. It has only moved from one mood to another. That is the lesson weather teaches over and over. Survival belongs to the person who notices early, adjusts without fuss, and keeps important things dry. You settle again near the wall, damp at the edges but warm in the centre, listening as the bells spread back into the misty dark. Above you, stars reappear one by one, cautious as sheep after thunder, and the night continues, washed, colder, and strangely calm. You step into the little shelter bent almost double, because mountain huts are rarely designed to flatter the spine. The doorway is low, the threshold uneven, and the darkness inside smells of smoke, old wool, damp stone, and animals who have made several bold contributions to the atmosphere. You pause while your eyes adjust. Outside, the pasture lies silver with wet grass. Inside, the hut holds its breath like a memory. The first comfort is not warmth. It is being out of the wind. The moment the gusts stop pushing at your cloak, your body notices, your shoulders lower, your ears stop feeling personally attacked. The hut is small, rough, and not especially clean, but it performs the great miracle of having walls. Walls are underrated until you spend enough nights without them. Then a wall feels like civilization giving you a quiet nod. Across many mountain regions, seasonal shelters were built for shepherds and herders who followed animals to summer grazing. In the Alps, such places might be connected with high dairy pastures. In Britain and Ireland, sheilings and upland huts served seasonal grazing systems. In Scotland and northern England, bothies later became known as simple mountain shelters, though many had earlier links to labour, estates or remote work in the Balkans, the Carpathians, the Pyrenees and the Caucasus. Small stone, timber, turf or clay structures supported pastoral life wherever flocks needed watching and milk needed processing. That is the mainstream historical fact, humble but sturdy. A hut exists because somebody got tired of losing arguments with weather. You run a hand along the wall. The stones are cold, stacked thick, with gaps packed by smaller pieces, mud, turf, or simply hope. A roof of slabs, thatch, wooden shingles, branches, sod or rough board slopes low above you. It may leak in 2 places, and moke in 3, and creak with every wind. But compared with open sky, it is practically a royal suite, a very spooky royal suite. One where the royal bed may include straw and a beetle with seniority. The floor is earth, tamped hard by boots, hooves, and seasons. A corner holds dry bracken or straw. Another has a blackened hearth. Perhaps only a stone-lined patch where small fires have burned for years. Soot darkens the roof beams. The smoke hole is not as ambitious as you would like. Smoke rises, changes its mind, and wanders sideways, making itself comfortable at eye level. You blink and crouch lower. Historical authenticity often arrives directly into the face. The shelter is not just a bedroom, it is tool shed, dairy room, storm refuge, storehouse, and sometimes social centre. A shelf may hold a wooden bowl, a ladle, a lump of salt, or a cracked pot left for whoever uses the place. Pegs may carry ropes, bells, a spare cloak, or a leather bag. In daring regions, milk could be strained, heated, curdled, or stored here, away from hard sun and sudden rain. Cheese begins with animals and grass, but it needs hands, vessels, time, and a place where the weather cannot immediately ruin everything. You sit on a low stone ledge and listen. The hut changes the sound of the night, Outside, I see bells spread across the pasture in open air. Inside, each bell arrives softened, rounded by walls. The dog's bark becomes deeper. Rain taps the roof instead of your forehead, which feels like a major technological advancement. The fire crackles in the hearth, its glow colouring the stones orange. A tiny draught slips under the door and crawls around your ankles like a cold cat. A quirky tidbit comes with the smoke-blackened stones. Some old shepherd huts and summer shelters carried marks scratched into beams or walls. Initials, crosses, dates, simple drawings of animals, tally marks, protective symbols, or little carvings made by bored hands during long weather. Not grand art, not polished decoration, just traces of people who sat where you sit, knife in hand, time moving unslowly, leaving a name or sign as if to say, yes, I was cold here too. It's comforting in a mildly depressing way. Historians still argue whether certain upland hut traditions should be read mainly as economic infrastructure. Family seasonal homes, ritualized landscapes, or flexible shelters that changed purpose across centuries. A single building might be all of these at different times. A grandmother may remember it as a place where children laughed during summer grazing. A tax record may call it a dairy structure. A walker may later call it picturesque. A shepherd may call it the only reason last night did not become a personal disaster. You notice how carefully the hut sits in the land. It is tucked below the ridge, not on top of it. Its back faces the worst wind. Its doorway looks towards the pasture, so animals can be watched. Nearby there may be a spring, a stream, or a hollow where snow lasts longer into the warm season. Stones for building were taken from the slope, or turf for roofing came from the ground around it. The shelter is not imposed on the mountain so much as borrowed from it, then persuaded into shape. Not every shelter is stone. In some pastoral zones, wood is common, and cabins or huts are built of logs or planks. In others, turf walls provide insulation. Elsewhere, woven branches plastered with mud create a seasonal room. Nomadic and semi-nomadic herders may use tents, felt dwellings, or portable structures instead of fixed huts, especially where movement covers greater distances. The principle remains the same. You carry shelter when you must, build it when you can, and improve it when you return often enough to care. The interior teaches economy. Nothing large fits, nothing unnecessary survives long. A wide bench is also a bed, a storage box is also a seat, a cloak is also a blanket, a hook from the roof holds a pot, then a bag, then a wet sock, possibly not in the best order. Every object has more than one duty. Modern people call this multifunctional design and charge extra for it. Shepherds called it not wanting to carry another thing uphill. You lean closer to the hearth. The fire does not fill the hut with clean warmth the way a tiled stove might. It gives uneven heat. Your front warms while your back remains cold. Smoke clings to your hair. Damp wool steams faintly. Still, the enclosed space holds more warmth than the open pasture. Even a few degrees matter. Even a roof that leaks in one corner is better than a cloud using you for target practice. The flock remains outside, though in rough weather lambs or weak animals may be brought near or into a sheltered pen. Some huts are paired with folds, pens, or stone enclosures where sheep can be gathered. In areas where predators are a threat, the arrangement of wall, hut, dog, and human presence creates a defensible little system. The hut is one piece of a wider night machine. Not beautiful, perhaps, but clever in the slow, practical way of places shaped by need. You stretch out on the dry side of the floor, which is not very dry but is making an effort. Straw crackles beneath your hip. The wall is close enough that your elbow touches it. The roof seems low enough to press dreams downward. Yet the smallness becomes soothing. Outside, the mountain is huge, wet, windy, and full of things you cannot see. Inside, there is firelight, stone, smoke, and the familiar clutter of survival. A mouse moves somewhere near the wall. You hear it before you see it. A tiny scratch, a pause, another scratch. You decide the mouse has probably lived here longer than you and is technically the host. You do not invite it to supper. Hospitality has limits. The dog outside gives a low huff, then settles again. Bells continue beyond the doorway, gentle and irregular. Your eyes grow heavy in the orange gloom. The hut does not remove hardship. It gathers it into a smaller space where hardship can be managed by hand. A wall against wind, a roof against rain, a hearth against cold, a shelf for tools, a dark corner for sleep. Simple pieces, repeated across mountain for centuries, each one answering the same old question: where can a tired shepherd place the body until dawn? You lie still while smoke threads upward and rain whispers on the roof. The stones hold the day's memory poorly, but they hold it. The fire sinks low. The hut creaks under the night wind and remains standing, modest, blackened, stubborn, in its cramped shelter, with your cloak around you and the flock breathing beyond the door. The mountain feels a little farther away, and sleep comes nearer on quiet, smoky feet. You do not fall asleep all at once. You sink into it by layers, the way mist settles into the folds of the pasture. First your thoughts loosen, then the fire becomes a soft blur, then the bells outside drift farther away. Although the flock has not moved much at all, sleep comes close, touches your forehead, and then a sheep coughs with the force of a small elderly judge, and you return to the world. This is how the night is divided, not by clocks, not by neat numbers on a glowing screen, but by sound, habit, and duty. A bell rings sharply, and you listen. A dog shifts, and you listen harder. A lamb bleats once, and you wait to hear whether its mother answers. The shepherd's rest is not one long curtain. It is a patched cloth, stitched from little pieces of sleep between small awakenings. Bells are among the oldest tools of pastoral attention. In many mountain regions, sheep, goats, and cattle wore bells so herders could locate them in fog, darkness, woodland, or uneven ground. The sound also helped identify movement. A slow scattered chiming might mean grazing. A sudden clatter might mean alarm or crowding. A bell gone silent in the wrong place could be more worrying than noise. This mainstream historical fact becomes very personal when your eyes are closed and the entire hillside has become a listening exercise. You learn the bells one by one. The deep bell belongs to the older you that pushes forward with unhurried authority. A thin, bright bell hangs from a restless young animal that seems spiritually opposed to staying anywhere useful. A dull bell sounds from farther down slope, half muffled by the wool or angle. Their notes make a loose map in your head, near the wall, near the hollow, above the stream, too close to the rocky edge, back again. Good. The dogs listen too, but differently. You listen for changes you recognize. They listen for changes beneath changes. Their heads lift before you know why. Their bodies stiffen when the flock's rhythm alters. If the bells are the night's scattered music, the dogs are its stern conductors, and you are the sleepy audience member trying not to miss the important part. You rise once to walk the edge of the flock. Your cloak hangs heavy from your shoulders. The cold presses into your face, waking you fully in the rudest possible way. Grass wets your boots. The sheep part slowly before you, then close again behind. Their bodies are dark humps under the dim sky. Some sleep standing and heads low. Others lie folded beneath themselves. A few continue eating because apparently digestion has no bedtime. Night watches were a central part of pastoral work when animals were vulnerable to predators, theft, weather, or wandering. In some places, shepherds took turns if several were together. One watched while others slept. In other places, a lone shepherd relied on dogs, bells, instinct, and the kind of light sleep that makes a person look peaceful while actually monitoring 12 separate problems. You begin to understand how people could become skilled at resting without surrendering. A quirky tidbit rings through the dark. In some Alpine and Mediterranean communities, bells were not chosen only for function. Their tones, sizes, and decorations could show ownership, pride, local style, or the status of a prized lead animal. A well-belled flock could sound beautiful, but also mildly competitive, like a village parade performed by creatures with no respect for rhythm. Certain bells were even believed to ward off evil or bad luck. It's hard to know whether spirits feared the sound, but you can confirm it discourages deep sleep. Historians still argue whether livestock bells were valued more for practical tracking, symbolic identity, ritual protection, or the social display of prosperous herding families. Standing in the dark, you suspect no single answer is enough. A bell can be tool, ornament, warning, signature, and comfort. Its sound tells you an animal still exists somewhere inside the night, which is more reassuring than it sounds until fog has swallowed half a hillside. You pause near a cluster of sheep and look upward. The clouds have torn open, and stars show in the gaps. The sky is clearer now, black and deep, with the Milky Way spread faintly across it like spilled flour on a dark table. Shepherds have long used the sky as a guide, not always with formal astronomy, but with practical familiarity. The position of stars, the moon's path, and the slow turning of constellations helped mark time and direction. You do not need to name every star to know whether the night is young or fading. The sky moves, and tired people learn to notice. A star near the ridge seems lower than it was. The moon has shifted behind a peak. Your body understands this better than your thoughts do. Time has passed, not enough. Perhaps. It is never enough when you're cold, but enough to know the night is not endless, even when it behaves suspiciously like it is. You return to the sheltering stones and lower yourself again. Your bedding has cooled while you were gone, which feels like betrayal. You curl tightly, breathe into the warmth near your chest without dampening the cloth too much, and wait for your body to forgive you. The bells continue. 1, 2, silence. A soft clank. A pause. 3 quick notes. The pattern becomes a lullaby with responsibilities. The mind in this state does peculiar things. Half asleep, you begin to fold dreams into the pasture. A bell becomes a church in the valley. A dog's huff becomes a person clearing his throat. A sheep shifting near your feet becomes, for one unreasonable instant, a tax collector, which is terrifying in any century. Then the sound repeats, ordinary and woolly, and you drift back down. If several shepherds share the watch, they may speak quietly when changing turns. No grand ceremony, a touch on the shoulder, a few words about wind, animals, a dog's unease, or the place where the flock has bunched too close. Then one sits up and the other folds down into warmth. Such exchanges preserve not only rest, but knowledge. Night information must pass from body to body before it is lost to sleep. You imagine the old rhythm repeated across ranges and centuries. A person waking beneath a cloak, a hand reaching for a staff, a face turned toward bells, a dog appearing from the dark, a flock breathing in broken silver light. The details differ, but the pattern stays recognizable. Watch, listen, sleep a little, rise, count, return, idea. Listen again. It is not glamorous, it is reliable. Glamour, like soft pillows, has limited use above the pasture line. The bells suddenly quicken at the far side. You sit up at once. A dog stands. Another move left. The sound rises, then settles. No panic spreads. Perhaps one animal stepped against another. Perhaps a lamb searched for its mother. Perhaps a goat did something unnecessary and blamed geography. You wait until the bells resume their ordinary spacing, Only then do you lower yourself again. This is the quiet discipline of the night watch. You must wake for what matters, and not fully wake for what does not. You must know when to rise, when to call, when to trust the dogs, when to conserve warmth, and when to accept that some noises are simply sheep being sheep, which is a whole category of inconvenience. The fire is nearly ash now. The stones still hold a faint warmth. Your eyelids grow heavy again. Outside, the bells spread across the dark like slow drops of sound. Each note says here, here, here. Each silence asks you to listen. You let the rhythm carry you. Never completely away, never fully awake, resting inside the old work of attention while the flock moves softly through the hours. You hear the wolf long before you see anything that could possibly be a wolf. Perhaps it is not even a wolf. Perhaps it is wind moving across a broken ridge, or a dog answering another dog too far away, or your sleepy mind adding teeth to a harmless sound because night enjoys unpaid theatre work. Still, the sound travels through you. A long, low note rises somewhere beyond the slope, thins into the dark and fades behind the stones. The flock becomes still, not completely still, because sheep are not famous for dramatic discipline, but still enough for you to notice. Heads lift, ears turn. A lamb presses closer to its mother. The dogs rise without being asked. One stands near the outer edge, chest forward, tail lifted, listening with its whole body. Another moves behind the animals, steadying the line. You sit up inside your cloak and feel the old animal inside your own ribs remember that darkness once had many mouths. Predators shape shepherd life in real and lasting ways. Wolves, bears, lynx, jackals, eagles taking lambs, and feral dogs all pose different risks depending on the region. In much of Europe and Western Asia, wolves became the most famous enemy of the flock, not because they were always present in every place, but because they stood for the larger fear of losing animals in the night. A mainstream historical fact is that many pastoral communities developed guarding systems using dogs. Night pens, fires, watch rotations, and seasonal routes partly in response to predators. The mountain was never empty. It was shared, sometimes politely, sometimes not. You grip your staff. Although you are aware that a staff does not make you a legendary warrior, it makes you a tired person holding a stick with conviction. Still, conviction has its uses. You stand, letting the cloak fall around you like a shaggy wall. The dogs bark now, deep and measured. Their sound is not panic, it is announcement. The flock presses inward, bells knocking in nervous little clusters. The darkness beyond the animals seems to thicken, and then, because human fear dislikes empty space, the invisible world comes with it. Spirits, witches, saints, fairies, demons, mountain guardians, wandering dead, and unlucky lights have travelled beside Shepard stories for centuries. The same slope that holds real paw prints can also hold rumours. A twisted tree becomes a watching figure. A pale stone becomes a crouching woman. A fox cry becomes something no fox would like to be blamed for. Night does not need many materials to build a legend. A little fog, a little hunger, a little loneliness, and the mind handles the decorating. A quirky tidbit slips out of that darkness with a grin. In some European mountain traditions, shepherds carried protective charms, blessed medals, pieces of rowan, iron objects, or prayers against witches who were said to steal milk or sour butter. The fear was not only that a predator might take an animal, but that invisible harm might touch the herd's fertility, milk, or luck. This sounds odd from a warm room, but up here, when your livelihood is chewing grass under a moonless sky, you may become open-minded about protection. Even a button feels reassuring if someone's grandmother declared it useful. You murmur a short phrase under your breath, not loudly enough to be a performance. It may be a prayer, it may be a habit, it may simply be the sound people make when the dark asks too much of them. Shepherds and Christian, Muslim, pagan, and mixed folk traditions often placed animal care inside a larger spiritual world. Saints might protect flocks, mountains might be watched by beings older than the church bell. Springs might have stories, certain nights might be unlucky. Certain words might be avoided after sunset because naming a danger can feel like inviting it to supper, and supper is already limited. Historians still argue whether shepherd superstitions should be understood mostly as fear, symbolic language, practical memory, social control, or emotional tools for enduring isolation. You can feel how each answer is partly true. A tale about spirits near cliffs may keep children and young helpers away from dangerous edges. A warning about witches at milking time may express anxiety about disease. Theft or poor yield, a saint's blessing may calm the mind enough to do the next necessary task. Belief is not always separate from survival. Sometimes it is survival wearing a story so people will remember it. The dogs bark again, then surge a few paces forward. You do not chase after them. That is their work, and you are not built for sprinting into darkness after experts. Instead, you move along the flock's inner edge, guiding animals away from the open side and toward the stones. Your voice stays low. A panicked shepherd can panic a flock, and a panicked flock can injure itself without any predator needing to assist. Sheep crowd together, hooves scraping, bodies peering. You widen your stance and press gently with the staff, redirecting rather than striking. There is no glory in frightening the creatures you're trying to protect. Somewhere beyond the first dog, something moves. You hear grass tear, then a stone slide. The bark changes, sharper now. Another dog answers from the left. The flock flinches. Your skin tightens. For one breath, every old story becomes possible. Wolf, bear, spirit, thief. A wandering saint with questionable timing. Then a shape breaks from the darkness, small and low, fleeing across the slope with a flash of tail. A fox, perhaps, or something fox-sized, suddenly aware that it has made poor social choices. The dogs pursue only far enough to prove the point. Their barking follows the shape downhill, then stops. The flock remains bunched, breathing hard, bells clashing in scattered bursts. You wait, because the end of danger is not always the end of fear. Animals need time to loosen, so do people. You stand with your staff planted in the earth, feeling your pulse in your throat, and try to look as if you knew it was a fox all along. The sheep are not impressed. The dogs may be. The fire has sunk low, but you stir it, bringing red coals into view. Light returns to the stones. This matters, not because light solves everything, but because it gives the eyes somewhere honest to rest. You feed the coals a little dry fuel, enough for a low flame. The warmth touches your fingers. The familiar smells return. Smoke, wool, damp grass, animal breath. The night steps back to its ordinary size. Still, the stories remain. You understand now why people gave names and faces to fear. A wolf is one danger, an unseen thing that might be wolf, weather, sickness, bad luck, or memory is harder to hold. Folklore gathers the uncertain into shapes, then teaches you how to behave around them. Do not sleep too far from the flock. Keep iron near the door. Bless the animals. Watch the ridge. Listen to the dogs. Leave a little respect for what you do not understand. These instructions may arrive wrapped in tale, but many of them are sound advice. You settle the flock gradually. A few animals break from the tight cluster and begin to crop grass again cautiously, as if the pasture might apologize. The lamb finds its mother and butts at her side. One ewe shakes herself with deep disapproval. Bells soften. The dogs return, broad heads high, pleased but restrained. One comes near the fire and looks at you as though expecting a formal acknowledgement of services rendered. You give it a scrap of praise and, after a moment, a crumb. Heroism has invoices. You lie down again, but sleep does not return at once. The dark beyond the fire feels populated now. not necessarily with monsters, but with possibilities. You listen to the slope, you listen to the dogs, you listen to your own breathing slowly become less foolish. Above the ridge, the stars show through ragged cloud. Each one is cold and distant, yet somehow calming. The night has reminded you that shepherd survival is never only about weather, bedding, or food. It is also about imagination kept in its proper place. Fear must be heard halls, but not obeyed blindly. Stories must be respected, but not allowed to scatter the flock. The wolf may be real, the pirate may be memory, the fox may be only a fox, rude and underqualified for the terror it caused. You pull the cloak around your shoulders, feel the dogs settle back into their stations, and let the bells stitch the darkness closed again, one soft note at a time. You wake into a quiet so wide it seems to have weight. The flock is near, the dogs are posted, the fire is low, and yet the silence between their sounds stretches far beyond the pasture. Down in the villages, even at night, there are small human noises, doors settling, a baby stirring, someone coughing behind a wall, a cartwheel remembered by the ruts it left in the lane. Up here, the human world has thinned to almost nothing. You're a single warm shape among animals and stones, and the mountain has no interest in keeping you entertained. Loneliness arrives softly at first. It does not stride over the ridge wearing a black cloak and making speeches. It sits beside you while you notice that no one has spoken for a long time. The bells continue, but bells are not conversation. A sheep sighs, which is emotionally available but not especially witty. The dog opens one eye, sees you looking at it, and closes the eye again with the calm cruelty of a creature that has boundaries. Shepherds often spent long periods away from settlements during seasonal grazing, especially in high summer pastures where flocks needed constant supervision. In many mountain societies, this work could be done by adult men, women, hired hands, young people, or whole seasonal groups, depending on local custom and economy. That is the mainstream historical fact. The shape of loneliness changed with the arrangement. A group in a summer hut might have talk, quarrels, songs, and shared labour. A lone shepherd might have only dogs, animals, weather, and the powerful suspicion that a nearby rock looked exactly like someone sitting down. You pull your cloak tighter and listen to the emptiness. It is not peaceful in the simple way people imagine from below. It is peaceful and difficult together. The stars are beautiful. Yes, but they are terrible company if you have news. You cannot tell a constellation that your boot is leaking. You cannot ask the moon whether that cheese smells safe. The moon, historically, has been very poor at practical feedback. So the lonely shepherd fills the night with sound, a hum at first, almost hidden inside the breath. Then a fragment of a tune learned from a parent or heard at a fair. Mountain song traditions often grew around labour, distance, and open air. Shepherds sang to pass time, soothe themselves, signal across slopes, calm animals, or simply remind the dark that a human being was present and had not yet become part of the geology. Some songs carried love stories, some carried jokes, some carried laments so old that no one remembered who first felt miserable enough to compose them. You sing under your breath, not loudly. The flock does not require a concert, and judging by the nearest UE's expression, it has very specific standards. The melody rises and falls with little ornament, shaped by the quiet and the cold. Your voice sounds strange in open air, smaller than it feels inside your chest. It travels a little way, catches on stone, and returns as a ghost of itself. This is enough. A person alone does not always sing to be heard. Sometimes a person sings to prove there is still someone who can hear. A quirky tidbit rests in that idea. In parts of Scandinavia, herding calls known as kulning were used, especially by women in summer pasture settings, to call cattle and communicate across long distances. The haiku, ringing sound, could carry astonishingly far in mountain and forest landscapes. It is not the same as a sleepy mutter beside sheep, but it shows how pastoral loneliness could create specialized voices, shaped by terrain itself. The land became part of the instrument. Also, it suggests that some historic herders could have absolutely destroyed a modern karaoke night without even warming up. Historians still argue whether pastoral songs and calls should be studied mainly as work tools, emotional expression, gendered tradition, territorial signalling, or memory carried in sound, sitting in the dark. You understand why scholars need several answers. A song can guide animals, comfort the singer, mark a valley as familiar, and preserve a story all at once. Human beings rarely waste a melody on only one purpose. When the voice fades, your hands seek occupation. A knife comes out, a small scrap of wood, already smoothed by earlier handling, rests in your palm. You carve without much plan, shaving a line, deepening a notch, shaping the end into something like a hook or a face or a pattern that pleases the thumb. Shepherds across many regions made small objects during idle hours, carved sticks, wooden spoons, tally marks, toys, pipes, charms, or decorated staffs. The work kept fingers busy and time from growing too large. It also left behind the most intimate kind of history, not royal decrees, not battlefield monuments, but a thatched piece of wood saying someone had to stay awake with the animals. Your knife moves slowly, the rhythm is calming. Shave, pause, listen. Shave, pause, listen. A dog huffs, a bell answers. Your carving becomes a ladder of the little cuts around the staff. Perhaps each mark could count animals, days, favours owed, storms endured, or simply moments survived without conversation. People are meaning-making creatures. Leave one alone with a knife and a stick, and eventually the stick develops symbolism, or at least decorative damage. Gossip, when unavailable, mattered too. In seasonal shelters where several shepherds gathered, talk could travel farther than roads. News from valleys, marriages, deaths, disputes, prices, rumours of war, rumours of wolves, rumours about a neighbour's daughter and a miller with suspiciously clean shoes. All could pass between herders at shared pastures. The high slopes were not cut off from society. They were a different kind of network, slow, smoky, and carried in memory rather than ink. A shepherd descending in autumn might bring cheese, wool, and 3 months of carefully aged opinions. You think of the village below. Perhaps lamps are out. Perhaps someone is still awake near a hearth. Perhaps someone has noticed the weather over the ridge and wondered whether the flock is settled. Distance changes affection. People who annoyed you by daylight can become tender in imagination when several miles of cold slope lie between you. Even the loud uncle who explains obvious things at supper begins to seem almost charming from far enough away. Almost. Let us not become unrealistic. Prayer fills another part of the empty space. Not always formal, not always spoken. A sign made over the body, a saint invoked for animals, a blessing murmured near milk pails, a scrap of scripture remembered badly but sincerely, a request to return with the flock intact. In Islamic pastoral settings, Christian mountain communities, and older folk traditions woven through both. Prayer and protection often stood close to daily labour. You do not need a cathedral when the sky is already making architectural points above your head. Loneliness also sharpens attention to small companionships. The dog's steady breathing becomes a comfort. The dew's bell becomes familiar. A lamb's small shape near its mother becomes oddly dear. You begin to know the animals not as a mass, but as personalities. The stubborn one, the nervous one, the clever goat who should be investigated by local authorities, the ewe who always chooses the same resting place. This knowledge is practical, but it is also company. Naming and noticing are ways of making the night less empty. You lean back against stone and look over the pasture. The moon has risen behind a gauze of cloud. turning the flock into pale islands. No one speaks, no one needs to. Your earlier song has faded, but the place does not feel as hollow. The carved staff rests beside you. A few new shavings lie near your boot. The dog has shifted closer, perhaps by accident, perhaps not. You will not embarrass it by mentioning this. The loneliness remains, but it becomes spacious rather than sharp. It gives room for memory, tunes, prayers, jokes told to no one, and the slow friendship of repeated sounds. You understand how shepherds could endure high nights not by defeating solitude, but by weaving it with habits. Sing a little, carve a little, listen often, think of home, but not too much. Trust the dogs, count the bells, save the last piece of bread. Do not ask the moon for advice. The fire glows faintly. The flock breathes in soft waves, your eyes lower. Somewhere inside the quiet, your own small presence feels less lost. You are not alone in the way a stone is alone. You are alone in the way a watchful person is alone, held by duties, animals, memory, and the wide dark. The mountain keeps its silence, and you answer with a slow breath, a half-remembered tune, and the steady patience to remain. You begin to understand warmth as something smaller and more precious than comfort. Comfort is a broad bed, a thick-walled, a shuttered window, perhaps a cup placed on a table by someone who is not judging the smell of your cloak. Warmth is simpler. Warmth is the little pocket of air between your chest and the wool. Warmth is the dry grass under your hip. Warmth is the place behind the wall where the wind loses interest. Warmth is the reason you do not stretch out dramatically like a tragic hero in a painting, because tragic heroes are always dressed badly for the weather. The body makes heat constantly, but the mountain is talented at stealing it. Heat leaves through exposed skin, through breath, through damp clothing, through contact with cold ground, and through wind that strips away the warmed air near the body. You may not use these scientific words while lying in the dark, but you feel their meaning. A bare hand cools quickly, a wet sleeve chills the wrist, a flat layer under the shoulder turns cold where your weight squeezes out the air. The lesson is clear. Keep dry, keep covered, keep air trapped, keep the wind from helping itself. Shepherds learned these rules through practice long before anyone explained them in tidy diagrams. A mainstream fact sits quietly inside every folded cloak and stone shelter. Insulation works because it traps air, and wool is especially useful because its crimped fibres hold tiny pockets of that air. Those pockets slow the loss of body heat. Dry straw, bracken, leaves, and animal skins do something similar beneath the body. They are not soft luxuries. They are barriers between living warmth and a cold earth that has been waiting all evening to borrow it permanently. You test this by shifting one knee off the bedding. The cold comes up at once, direct and rude. You tuck the knee back. Excellent research. No further study required. A thin layer of dry stems suddenly feels like advanced technology. Your sheepskin matters too. The wool side holds air against you. The hide side limits damp from below. Even a coarse cloak folded twice under the ribs can improve the night. The mountain remains cold, but the cold must now pass through several small arguments before reaching you. Your sleeping shape matters as much as your bedding. You draw your knees closer, curve the back, lower the head, and keep the arms near the body. A curled body loses less heat than a stretched one because less surface is offered to the air. This is why lambs fold themselves small. Dogs tuck their noses under tails, and tired shepherds become human commas in the dark. It is not graceful, but grace is overrated when your toes are filing complaints. You pull the cloak over the head for a moment, then loosen it. Trapped breath warms the face, but too much breath brings moisture, and moisture is a sneaky little thief. Damp cloth loses warmth faster and grows heavy. Experienced sleepers leave a breathing gap. Sometimes turning the face away from the inner folds, it feels fussy until you wake with a dry chest instead of a clammy one. Then it feels like wisdom. The flock itself changes the air. You cannot climb inside a sheep, although by this point you may have considered it as a housing strategy, but many animals gathered near one another release heat into the space around them. In a tight fold pen, shelter yard, or calm cluster beside a wall, that warmth can slightly soften the cold. Their bodies also block wind near the ground. The smell is powerful. Yes, the closeness is not elegant, but the living mass of the flock is part of the shepherd's night climate. A slow breathing buffer against the open air. A quirky tidbit settles warmly into the wool. In several cold pastoral traditions, people used cloaks or capes so thick that they could stand upright on their own when stiffened by weather, smoke, and use. Travellers loved to describe such garments as if they were meeting furniture with sleeves. Some shaggy coats shed rain so well that water ran down the outer hairs, while the inner layers stayed drier. Not perfectly dry, of course. Perfection still lives indoors with the smug pillows, but dry enough to matter. Historians still argue whether the most effective shepherd clothing developed mainly through trial and error. Specialised craft, local sheep breeds, trade influence, or knowledge carried between herding communities over long distances. You can feel all of those influences in a single garment. A thick cloak may depend on the kind of wool available, the way it is woven or felted, the climate it must face, and the memory of someone who once froze through a thinner one and decided never again. You shift closer to the low wall. Stone is complicated. It can be cold against the hand, yet it blocks wind and stores a faint memory of sun or fire. A wall behind you prevents moving air from stealing the warmth gathered around your back. If the stones have sat near fire or held daytime heat, they may give a little back, not enough to make you cheerful, enough to make you stop muttering. In the mountains, that is a meaningful improvement. Low sleeping can help too. Wind often runs stronger above the ground and over ridges. A hollow can be colder if it collects heavy night air, but a low protected place behind a wall, boulder, or turf bank may reduce exposure. The trick is choosing a place sheltered from wind without becoming a bowl for frost or water. The mountain gives with one hand and steals with the other, which is poor manners but consistent policy. You check your feet. Feet are small, far from the body's warm centre, and dramatic when cold. You wiggle the toes, then press them together. If spare cloth exists, it goes around the feet. If not, the cloak is pulled lower. In some places, shepherds wore woolen socks, rawhide shoes, felt boots, or layered wrappings that could be dried near a fire. Foot warmth is not a detail. A person who cannot feel the ground well cannot guide animals safely when trouble comes. Your hands hide inside the cloak, fingers curl into the palms, a staff lies nearby, but not grip too long, because a cold wood can draw heat from bare skin. You smile at the thought of your own hands as tiny livestock needing shelter. They are not brave, they are useful. That is better. Food contributes quietly now. The bread, cheese, and milk in your stomach become fuel for the body's furnace. Cold nights demand energy. A hungry body has fewer resources to produce heat. This is one reason a simple supper before sleep matters. It is not indulgence, it is maintenance. The body is an animal too, and tonight you are responsible for it, despite its many design complaints. The fire is low, but the coals still matter. Radiant heat warms the side facing them. You turn a little, then turn back, rotating like the world's least glamorous roast. A small fire cannot heat the whole mountain, but it can warm fingers, dry an edge of cloth, and revive courage. Courage, you discover, is partly temperature. A person with cold hands is far less philosophical. You think of all the small principles working together. Dry grass below, wool around, skin against damp, curled limbs, shelter from wind, breath vented, animals nearby, food inside, coals alive. Each is modest, none alone is enough. Together they make a narrow climate around your body, a private weather system built from old knowledge and necessity. This is the science of staying warm. Although no one needs to call it science while half asleep under a smoky cloak. The night deepens again. Frost begins to silver the exposed grass. Tiny crystals forming where moisture meets cold. The outer edge of your cloak stiffens faintly. Inside your chest remains warm. Not cozy in the polished, indoor sense. Warm enough. Safe enough. The difference between misery and rest may be the width of one folded layer. You close your eyes and feel the warmth you have saved rather than the cold you cannot change. Your breathing slows, the flock gives off its soft animal heat beyond the wall. The dog nearby tucks its nose beneath its tail, demonstrating excellent technique without being asked. You do the human version, folded, covered, listening. The mountain night continues trying to take warmth away, but now it must work for it. Every layer answers back, every fold, stem, stone, and breath says not yet. You lie in the small shelter of your own body wrapped in wool and patient scents, while the cold passes over and around you like dark water around a stone. You rise while the dark is thinning, not because you are rested in any luxurious sense, but because the flock has begun to loosen. Sheep understand morning before people do. They lift their heads, shake dampness from their wool, and begin making small decisions that will soon become a large wandering problem. A lamb steps over your cloak with the innocent confidence of someone crossing public land. You open one eye and consider explaining property rights to it, but the lamb has already moved on to more important matters, such as finding breakfast and being adorable with poor boundaries. The path waits beyond the pasture, pale in the early light. It is not a road in the polished sense. It is a memory pressed into the mountain by hooves, boots, weather, and return in many pastoral landscapes. Seasonal movement shaped recognizable routes between lowland settlements and upland grazing. This practice, Korbyung, often called transhumance, is a mainstream historical fact across parts of Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. Animals moved with the seasons, and people moved with them, carrying food, tools, bedding, songs, habits, and the quiet knowledge of where each bend might betray an ankle. You gather your things carefully. The cloak is shaken, folded, then slung over your shoulders. The bundle is tied. The staff is tested against the ground. Any ember that remains is buried or scattered safely, because leaving fire alive behind you is not rustic charm. It is a terrible review from the entire hillside. You check the small place where you slept, making sure no useful strap, knife, bowl, or scrap of food has been abandoned. A shepherd owns few things, which makes each forgotten thing personally insulting. The animals begin to stream in the direction of grazing or travel. Depending on the day's plan, some mornings mean staying near the high pasture, others mean shifting to another slope, a fresh meadow, a water source, a salt place, or the long descending route toward the valley as the season changes. Movement is not random. It follows grass, weather, ownership rights, custom, and memory. The flock may seem like a loose woolen cloud, but the shepherd sees patterns inside it. Which animals lead, which lag, which lamb needs watching, which goat is already considering a career in crime. Seasonal roads carried more than animals. They carried language, trade, news, tools, seeds, marriage connections, recipes, melodies, and rumours polished smooth by retelling. A shepherd moving from valley to height might pass shrines, markets, boundary stones, bridges, mountain passes, inns, and other grazing groups. These routes tied communities together. They also caused arguments, because wherever animals move, questions follow. Who may graze here? Who repairs the walls? Who pays for crop damage? Why is your ram looking at my ewes like that? Rural law has never lacked material. In medieval and early modern Europe, rights to common grazing could be carefully regulated by village custom, noble estates, monasteries, or local agreements. Some high pastures belonged to communities, some were rented, some were disputed with the enthusiasm humans reserve for land, water, and cheese. Moving a flock required knowing not only the landscape but the social map laid over it. A wrong turn could lead to poor grass, danger, or a neighbour with a memory like a tax ledger. A quirky tidbit trots along the track. In parts of Spain, great livestock routes known as cañadas were protected for moving sheep over long distances, especially during the height of the wool trade. Some routes were wide enough to carry enormous flocks through the landscape, and local people had to live with the seasonal arrival of thousands of animals passing by like a slow, bleating weather system. Imagine trying to explain to a visitor that traffic is delayed because wool has legal priority. Honestly say, it is not the worst transport policy humanity has invented. Historians still argue whether long-distance transhumance was driven mainly by climate adaptation, market demand for wool and dairy, pressure on lowland land, political organisation, or older habits of mobility that proved too useful to abandon. The answer likely changes from one region to another. A flock in the Alps does not move for exactly the same reasons as one crossing Iberian plains or one shifting between Anatolian uplands. Yet the rhythm feels familiar. Grass grows here now. Cold will come later. Move while the animals can feed. Return when the mountain closes its hand. You follow the flock along a contour path where the slope falls away to one side. The morning air tastes of wet grass and stone. Bells sound brighter now, less haunted than at night. A dog trots ahead, then turns back to check the stragglers. Another works the side, preventing the animals from spreading too far. Your body complains as it warms into movement, but walking soon loosens the stiffness left by cold ground. The mountain seems less threatening in morning light, which is exactly how it lures people into forgetting last night's behaviour. On seasonal roads, timing matters. Too early in spring, snow remains deep and grass is thin. Too late in autumn, storms close passes and nights sharpen. Shepherds watched flowering plants, melting snow lines, river levels, insect swarms, and their condition of animals. Lambs must be strong enough for movement. Milk animals must be managed. Weak or sick creatures may slow the whole flock. The route is not simply walked. It is negotiated day by day with weather and bodies. You pass a cairn on the path, stones stacked by many hands. It marks the way through fog or snow, or perhaps a boundary, or perhaps simply the human desire to say, "Here, remember this place?" Nearby, a spring slips from under a rock. The sheep know it and press toward it, but you hold them back enough to prevent crowding. Watering a flock has its own order. Animals can trample mud, foul a stream, or push weaker ones aside. The shepherd's work is 1,000 small corrections disguised as walking. The route also carries danger. Narrow ledges, sudden storms, loose scree, rivers swollen by meltwater, a lost lamb calling from behind a boulder, a tired dog limping, a pack strap breaking at the least poetic moment. You learn to pause before steep descents, to spread the flock before bottlenecks, to avoid soft ground that may swallow hooves, to count after passing difficult places. A path is a promise only if you keep checking that everyone is still on it. As the sun climbs, warmth touches the backs of the animals. Steam rises faintly from damp wool. The high pasture opens ahead, wide and green in a fold between ridges. This is why the climb is made, why nights are endured, why rough beds and smoky cloaks become ordinary. Grass lies thick where ploughs cannot reach. The flock pours into it eagerly, heads lowering almost at once. Bells scatter into a relaxed music. The dogs slow, satisfied but not careless. You stand with your staff planted in the ground, feeling the path behind you and the season around you. The mountain roads are not merely lines between places, they are habits worn into earth, agreements between people and animals, arguments with weather, and memories carried in the feet. Every return teaches the way again. Every flock adds its soft pressure to the old track. You breathe in the morning, watch the animals settle into grazing, and understand that survival at night is only one part of the larger rhythm. The shepherd sleeps in the sky because the road has brought the flock there, and because, when the season turns, the road will carry everyone home. You notice the modern whirl first as a thin, silver line far below, a road cutting through the valley where carts once crawled and pack animals once sighed their way around bends. A vehicle glints in the morning sun, moving so quickly it seems almost rude. Another follows. Then the sound reaches you late, softened by distance, a faint growl under the bells. The flock does not care. The sheep have seen civilization and remain committed to grass. The mountains are still old, but they are no longer separate from the age of engines, weather reports, mobile telephones, rescue helicopters, electric fences, and tourists wearing jackets bright enough to guide ships through fog. The shepherd's night has changed, not everywhere and not completely, but enough that the old habits now live beside new tools. A person may still sleep near the animals under a rough roof or open sky, yet somewhere in the bundle there may be a telephone, a plastic water bottle, a headlamp, or a battery pack guarded more carefully than bread. The human species remains ancient, but now it worries about signal strength. In many mountain regions, traditional pastoralism continues today, although often under pressure from changing economies, tourism, land abandonment, predator return, climate shifts, and fewer young people willing to take on hard seasonal work. That is a mainstream fact of modern rural life. Some shepherds still move animals to high pastures, some use vehicles for part of the route, some manage flocks with fences, tracking devices, veterinary medicines, and official grazing permits. Others work almost as their grandparents did, except with their waterproof coats that do not smell quite as heroic. You stand near a modern shepherd's hut, and it is both familiar and strange. The walls may be stone, but the roof is metal. A solar panel leans on one side. A plastic barrel catches rainwater. Inside to neither there may be a camp bed, a small stove, a radio, a first aid box, and a calendar with an optimistic landscape photograph, which feels unnecessary because the actual landscape is right outside and far more demanding. The smoke still clings to corners, damp socks still hang badly. The hut has entered the present, but it has not become glamorous. This is reassuring. Glamour would only make the goats suspicious. A shepherd now may check the forecast before climbing, watching satellite images and storm warnings that earlier herders would have greeted as either magic or unfair competition. Yet the old signs still matter. A forecast can miss the way wind behaves in a particular valley, how fog gathers near one ridge, or where hail tends to form when warm air rises from below. Local knowledge remains stubbornly useful. The sky may be tracked by instruments, but the shepherd still looks up. The dog still sniffs the wind. The sheep still bunch together before rough weather, though they refuse to explain their data sources. A quirky tidbit appears with the modern tools. In some regions, shepherds and conservation workers have used global positioning collars on livestock or guard dogs to track movement, prevent loss, and study grazing patterns. This means that somewhere, a sheep may be wandering across a mountain while being observed by satellite, which sounds deeply impressive until you remember the sheep is probably using advanced space technology to locate the wrong side of a fence. Progress is real, but sheep remain committed to humbling it. Historians still argue whether modern changes to mountain pastoralism represent decline, adaptation, revival, or transformation into something partly economic and partly cultural. A festival that celebrates transhumance may preserve memory, support tourism, and honour heritage. But it is not the same as moving animals because the household depends on every season's grazing. A protected hut may become a charming stop for hikers. While an active shepherd sees it as a place to dry boots and avoid hypothermia, the same stone building can be heritage for one person and workplace for another. You watch hikers pass along a marked trail, poles clicking, packs bright, faces red with effort and self-improvement. They admire the flock from a safe distance, then take photographs. One whispers, as if sheep require cathedral manners. Another gets too close to a guard dog and receives a deep warning bark that rearranges the afternoon. Modern visitors often imagine mountain life as peaceful simplicity, the kind of thing printed on postcards. The shepherd knows that simplicity can contain tax forms, veterinary bills, lambing problems, broken fences, bad weather, and tourists asking whether the sheep have names. Some do, some are known by behaviour, some are known mainly as that one, again. Rescue huts, bothies, and mountain refuges also carry echoes of older shelter. Hikers now sleep in places once built for work or built later with similar logic. Thick walls, low doors, a roof against weather, a place raised just enough above damp ground. The language changes from shepherd survival to outdoor recreation, but the body's needs remain almost embarrassingly traditional. Be dry, be warm, be out of the wind, eat something, do not sleep in a drainage channel. Modern gear may be lighter, brighter, and more expensive, but the mountain's basic questions remain unchanged. Predators have returned to some areas where they had long been reduced or absent. Wolves, bears, and lynx have come back in parts of Europe due to legal protection, rewilding, land use change, and natural expansion. Their return has created sharp debates among conservationists, farmers, shepherds, governments, and rural communities. For a person in a city, a wolf can be a symbol of ecological recovery. For a shepherd lying awake near lambs, a wolf can also be a bill, a loss, and a night of shouting and black air. Both realities can exist, which is inconvenient for slogans but normal for life. So the old guardians remain relevant. Livestock guardian dogs are used again or more widely in some places, sometimes after generations when few were needed. Electric fences help, but they need power, maintenance, and careful placement. Night enclosures reduce risk but add labour. Compensation schemes may repay losses, but they rarely repay sleep. You watch the dogs patrolling under the highlight, and their role feels less like a relic than a recurring answer. The mountain keeps asking. The dog keeps replying. Climate also shifts the rhythm. Warmer temperatures can change when grass grows, how long snow remains, where water flows, and how drought affects pasture. Storms may arrive differently, heat can stress animals, new plants may spread upward. Old calendars become less reliable. Shepherds adapt by moving earlier or later, seeking water in different places, changing breeds, reducing flock size, or leaving the work entirely. When a landscape changes, tradition does not simply continue untouched. It bends, resists, frays, and sometimes begins again in altered form. Yet many old skills still show themselves in small gestures. A shepherd repairs a wall with stones fitted by eye. A wet cloak is turned just so. A lamb is recognized by its cry. A dog is praised with one quiet word. Cheese is cut with a knife that has done many jobs. Weather is read from cloud and bone-deep memory. These actions are not museum pieces. They are living shortcuts, preserved because they still work. You sit outside the hut as afternoon leans toward evening. Far below, the road flashes again. Above, a jet crosses the sky, leaving a pale line that slowly spreads. Between road and jet, the flock grazes in a pattern older than either. Bells ring, dogs move, grass disappears into wool, milk, and sleep. Your headlamp rests in your bundle beside a wooden cup. The old and new do not cancel each other. They share space awkwardly, practically. Like two shepherds under one leaking roof, The mountain remains itself through all of this, not untouched, not timeless, but patient. It accepts satellite collars and carved staffs, plastic tarps and stone walls, rescue maps and weather rhymes, tourists with cameras and shepherds with tired knees. The night will still come. Wind will still search for gaps. Animals will still drift unless watched. A person will still pull a layer close and listen for bells in the dark. Modern echoes ring across old mountains, and beneath them the ancient work continues, quieter than nostalgia, harder than romance, and stubbornly alive. You wake into pale mountain light, not with a start, but by slowly returning to yourself. The dark thins first around the ridges, then in the hollows, then across the backs of the sheep. One by one, shapes become animals again instead of suggestions. The nearest ewe stands with dew shining along her wool, chewing with the calm expression of someone who has never questioned the meaning of existence and sees no reason to begin now. The cold has not disappeared, but it has changed character. Night cold is private and close, pressing under cloth and into fingers. Morning cold is wider, washed with light, carrying the faint promise that movement will help. You uncurl carefully, discovering the full geography of your own stiffness. Your hip remembers the stone, your shoulder remembers the bundle, your neck remembers that pillow was a poetic exaggeration. You sit up and make the quiet little sounds all humans make when rising from the ground, ancient music rarely eluded in heroic tales. Dawn is work before it is beauty. The flock must be counted, gathered, checked, and guided. Lambs must find mothers. Weak animals must be noticed. Dogs must be called in and sent out again. Bedding must be shaken free of frost, straw, and anything lively that tried to move in during the night. A shepherd may admire the sunrise, certainly, but usually while tying something, looking for something, or preventing one ambitious goat from becoming a mountaineering legend, you stand and look across the pasture. The animals are scattered, but close. Bells sound lazily now, small notes in clean air. The dogs stretch, yawn, and immediately pretend they've been fully alert the entire time. One shakes dew from its coat, spraying a glittering arc across the grass, and naturally, your boots. This is how the mountain says good morning. Very refreshing, very unnecessary. In many pastoral societies, morning after a high pasture night involved practical routines that linked animal care with food production. Milking might take place early, especially where sheep, goats, or cows were kept for dairy. Milk could be processed into cheese or curd soon after, because warmth and time change it quickly. This is a mainstream historical fact that gives dawn its urgency. The pretty light on the ridge is lovely, but the milk will not wait politely for you to feel poetic. You move among the flock with your staff, counting by eye, by habit, by the bells you have learned. A missing animal leaves a gap in the pattern even before the number confirms it. There is the older ewe, the restless young one, the lamb that sleeps too deeply, the goat standing on a rock with the unbearable confidence of a minor official. You find them all good. No one has rolled into a gully, wandered into fog, or joined a rival philosophical movement. A lamb presses under its mother to nurse, tail flickering with happy urgency. Nearby, another complains because it has temporarily misplaced the correct side of its own mother. You guide it gently. The ewe answers with a low sound, and the pair reunites. Shepherding is made of these tiny rescues, too small for monuments, too important to ignore. History often remembers kings, battles, treaties, and towers. The flock remembers who noticed the lost lamb at dawn. A quirky tidbit brightens the morning. In some mountain communities, the first movement of animals out to fresh grazing could be marked by bells, blessings, or little seasonal customs, especially at the beginning of summer pasture. Led animals might wear special bells or decorated collars for festive processions. The night may have been cold and smoky, but human beings still found ways to make livestock look ceremonial. Sheep, to their credit, accepted honours mostly by eating nearby plants. Historians still argue whether such pastoral rituals were mainly religious acts, community celebrations, displays of ownership and wealth, or practical ways to organise movement and reinforce shared rights. Standing with wet boots among impatient animals, you can see how all of that may be true. A decorated bell can honour a saint, identify a flock, delight a village child, and remind a neighbour whose animals are definitely not welcome in the wrong meadow. The sun lifts higher. Its first warmth touches your face, then your hands. Steam rises faintly from the damp backs of sheep. The pasture smells alive again, grass torn fresh by teeth, wet soil, smoke fading from your cloak, milk warming in the udder, dog fur and stone drying after darkness. The whole slope seems to exhale. Night's anxieties shrink in daylight, not because they were foolish, but because the day gives them edges. You scatter the ashes properly, making sure no hidden ember remains. The fire that comforted you must not become danger when you leave. You fold the sheepskin, shake the cloak, and tighten the bundle. The place where you slept returns to being only a patch of ground near stones. Nothing grand marks it. No plaque appears saying a tired person survived here with moderate dignity. The mountain is not sentimental. That is part of its charm, and also its terrible customer service. The dogs begin to push the flock gently toward the day's grazing. They do not rush. Morning movement is controlled by appetite. Sheep drift where grass invites them. You guide the edges, turning one cluster away from loose stones, another towards safer turf. Your voice stays low, familiar, almost sleepy. The flock knows it. The dogs know it. Even the goat knows it and chooses to respect it only selectively. You look once toward the valley. Smoke rises there again from houses, pale and thin. People below may be waking to bread, chores, market talk, and floors that do not contain surprise pebbles. Their world depends, quietly, on nights like this, on animals fed in high grass, on milk carried down, on wool shorn, on paths kept open, on shepherds who sleep lightly above the roofs. The high pasture is not separate from the village. It is the village stretched upward into the sky. You begin to walk, staff in hand, cloak over one shoulder, the flock spreading ahead through the brightening grass. Your body is tired, but it has learned the shape of the night and come through it. Not by conquering anything, not by becoming fearless, by noticing, adjusting, warming, listening, eating, trusting dogs, reading weather, and accepting that a bed can be a folded cloak beside a wall if the sky insists. The bells ring more clearly now, each note washed clean by dawn. The dogs pass through the flock like moving shadows, made friendly by light. The ridge glows, the valley waits. You move with the animals into the day, carrying smoke in your clothes and stars somewhere behind your eyes, while the old rhythm continues, quiet, practical, and steady as hooves on a mountain path. Now the morning softens around you. The hard edges of stone, wind, and worry begin to loosen. You do not need to climb higher. You do not need to count every bell anymore. You can simply let the flock drift in your imagination, slow and pale across the green slope, each animal becoming smaller as the light grows warmer. The dogs settle at the edges, watchful but calm. Their ears move now and then, but the danger has faded into distance. The wall behind you holds no more cold lessons. The cloak around your shoulders feels lighter. Smoke thins into the clean air. Far below, the village rests in a blue haze, roofs tucked together like folded hands. You breathe in, and the breath is easy. You breathe out, and the mountain gives back silence. Grass bends under gentle hooves. Bells ring once, then pause, then ring again, slower, softer, farther away. The sky above is no longer a roof of black stars, but a pale bowl of morning, wide and kind. Everything that had to be done has been done. The fire is clear, the animals are gathered, the path is known. The night has passed through you and left only a quiet warmth behind. You are allowed to rest now. The shepherd within this story can keep walking, but you can let the scene grow dim. The flock becomes a soft blur of wool and light. The dogs become still shapes at the edge of sleep. The mountains fade from silver to blue, from blue to mist, from mist to nothing that needs a name. No wind pushes at you now, no stone presses sharply. Only the faint bell, the slow breath, the gentle hush of distance. And there, in that calm high pasture, with dawn spilling softly over the grass, you let the last image drift away. End of script. Sweet dreams.